called this White Premium 21. I'm going to touch on some soil health things included with why we're excited about these biogrow products. So you've seen this before, you'll see it again after lunch, but the 3 pillars of regenerative farming: manage that air and water in the soil, the pore space, manage residues, manage the crop fertility. So how do we boost fertility on your farm? What's your soil structure? Is it compacted? Is it platy? Is it loose? Do your roots tend to run lateral, or can they pour right down through that soil? So what's your soil structure? If the roots can't penetrate it well, then there's things that we can do to help that. How's your tilth? It's the coffee ground structure right on the surface. Do we have that loose, tilthy structure? Do you have biomass of or from life? Do we have biomass? Do we have a lot of organisms, microorganisms growing there? Or do we have a lot of biomass from life, meaning crop residues? All of that is an opportunity. Microbial active carbons, that's borrowing a term from the Rick-Haney test. But if we have carbons out there that our microbes can use as a food source, can we use some kind of biostimulant to improve the microbial active portion of them? Sometimes using molasses, sugars, etc. on residues, we can speed up the decomposition of them in a very beneficial way, as well as these humics. Is rapid residue degradation, is that important? We've been taught as farmers for years we want to preserve that on the surface of the soil. We're going to say that that's not the way to go at this thing. In the Midwest where we're at, if you're in the deep South, in the heat, it's a different ballgame. But here in the Midwest, we have seen for decades that if we can break that residue down quickly, we create tilth, we create nutrient use efficiency, the soil improves, the crop improves, it's a good thing. So we want to use, and we do use natural occurring organisms, but we want to put them on steroids, so to speak. Put some biostimulants with them in order to speed them up so they do their work quicker, and we see very beneficial results from that. You've seen slides like this from us forever. NPK in nutrients, 220 bushel corn, there's around 100 pounds of nitrogen there to be mineralized out, 33 pounds of phosphate. The potash is pretty much going to come out anyway, but there's a lot there to be recycled. So residue decomposition, we're saying it's important, it's a key to creating that tilth that we're after. How do we view it? Just putting some different words to it that might trip some triggers within your own mind. But we want to accelerate the feast. If we've got a lot of crop residue out there, a lot of straw, a lot of corn stalks, it's going to break down. It's going to disappear over time. But if we can speed that up, we see beneficial results in the soil. So we want to accelerate that feast. That helps us to get ahead of the curve before planting. Dr. Meir was talking about immobilization, where you're tying nutrients up in the bodies of organisms. Mineralization is where those buds are releasing, where they're dying off, releasing the nutrients. It's critical that we not have tremendous immobilization at planting time, or we're going to stunt that crop. It's not going to do well coming out of the ground. So if we do these kinds of things, we can get ahead of the curve and accelerate and get to the point that we have net mineralization, more nitrogen being released than is being tied up by those organisms. Nitrogen fixing. Jerzy Novak years ago, one of our seminars, was sharing with us that if you have a lot of crop residue laying out there, you've got a lot of corn stalks, your nitrogen fixing organisms are going to populate at much higher levels. He threw out a number to us that the nitrogen fixers would be there at 1,000 times greater than if you didn't have a lot of residue laying there. So if there's residues to break down, we have some advantage in that we can get these nitrogen fixers to thrive because the soil needs them, which can pull nitrogen from the air and ultimately get it sequestered into the carbons in our soils. So in that regard, we can utilize more of that carbon. We're going to build the soil, we're going to aggregate it, we're going to reduce erosion if we can aggregate that soil, we're going to increase humus, we're going to improve that tilth, and we're going to improve the water holding capacity. Gary, give me a heads up when there's about 5 to go. See if we get through these. If you Google and look up humic things online, this Dr. Robert Pettit shows up a lot. He has written several papers and reviews of papers, so he assimilates lots of information. He makes the statement, humic substances are recognized by most soil scientists and agronomists as the most important component of healthy fertile soil. We've kind of heard about that from the BioGrow folks here this morning. So this was in Barrow County, I don't know, a few years back, put up the residues, put on in the fall, and within 30 days we saw that kind of decomposition happening. I mean, that's what we like. Not everybody's gonna get that, you're not gonna get that every time, but when you can get the residue to accelerate the decomposition to that extent, odds are you're gonna have a different kind of soil to work with in the spring. This is common to see on the lower right when you treat fields where you'll see the center of that stalk hollowing out. The rind of the stalk, which is really tough, lots of lignins, it's going to degrade over time, but it's slower, but we'll really get after that cellulose, that soft part up the middle of the stalk. So in these plots, we went in and weighed residue from treated and untreated and proved out that we greatly accelerated the decomposition. It's actually done on Eric Johnston's farm, which is, he's sitting in the back here. That's it. So how's your pore space? Keep hammering on this. You know, what's in a well-structured soil? 5% organic matter, 45% mineral, 25% water, 25% air. We've seen that probably hundreds of times, and it's just kind of boring stuff. But if you think with us a little bit here, that top statement, the root is the reflected image of the soil. We love to dig roots, look at how they're growing, where they're growing, and it tells us a lot. If they're growing laterally and they're only a few inches deep, they're not getting down through the soil, that tells us something. But think about that pore space. It's supposed to be 50%. Where are we at? What do we have? Most of us don't know on the farm, on the field-by-field basis. But if you walk it and think about it a little bit, you can figure it out in pretty short order. Does it feel like concrete or does it feel like walking on a sponge? Monty Thompson will show us some pictures in a video here after lunch where we change some soils very quickly. And we're seeing that more and more, I guess, as we get a little bit smarter about how we put these products and how we put these systems together. But think about that pore space, the aggregation. Good crumb structure has been calculated up to 9 square miles per square yard of soil surface. That's from a book from Henning, who's a German. Think about that, 9 square miles per square yard of soil surface. And to take that to a whole nother level would be what Dr. Meir is representing here. You know, aggregation is one thing, but if I got it today, I think. I've heard him about 3 times now. But this goes beyond aggregation into the micropores and in nanometers, a whole different level. When we get the humics doing what we need them to do at high enough levels, I assume, that would totally dwarf that 9 square miles, I assume. Would that be a correct statement?
It will enhance, it get more.
Yeah, dramatically more than I assume.
I didn't want to confuse them. I had that, but I didn't want to stay calm. Yes, you're right.
Thank you. So the point is that this requires biotic engineering. If you're going to bring these aggregates together, it's a microbial process. The microbes put out polysaccharides, sticky stuff to help stick all these things together. And to increase pore space, we have to increase our aggregation. To get the aggregation, we have to treat the soil in a certain way to get there. So how do we do that? The biotic engineering. We're trying to get biologically created aggregates. We're trying to get water-stable aggregates that won't melt down if we get a shower of rain on them. So we need a community of organisms. We need bacteria, fungi, algae, nematodes, protozoa. We need all these good things working together in that soil community, in the soil food web, if you're used to that term, in order to make this go. So as we have gotten better over the years at getting the right biostimulants in the right places, that's really the ultimate goal, is to get a community of organisms working together. Many of the bacterias produce antibiotics and such. You can't have them working against each other. Those organisms are good, not saying they're not, but you can put together packages that will be somewhat antagonistic. We need those packages to be very synergistic with all of the organisms, all of that community working together, and then it's something special. So we want to convert that residue. We want that residue to go, to break into organic matter, looks a little bit different, ultimately into humus. If we can break our residue into humus, there's a real good chance your farm's going to be worth more money each and every year. Because if we can boost our humus content and have fresh humus in those soils versus maybe old organic matter, that's a good thing. And Dr. Muir hit on that. It was cool today too on the 0.5% organic matter maybe has more biological activity than a 10% organic matter, depending on what that organic matter came from or how fresh it is. Would that be an accurate way to put that?
Absolutely.
And that's a big deal. So to create the till, we may need to start that mechanically in order to break up the soils and create the pore space. If we have to do it mechanical, fine. If your soil is hard, if it feels like concrete, if you've got a plow pan, then putting some tillage to that to break it up is a great first step. But if we do that and we're going to spend the energy for the fuel, we need to do the things below it as well. We need to put some calcium nutrition on, that calcium that will flocculate the clays, get those clays to clump together. Then we need the biology in order to pull the larger particles, the clays and everything else together to make that aggregate that we can actually see with the naked eye. We need bulk carbon, so we need food source for the bugs. So we need some residue or manure or compost. All of those things can work very well. We need some soil cover perhaps, particularly if you're in a hot climate. We need to have that soil covered so that we can regulate temperature and moisture. So if we need to create that tilth, those bottom 4 points need to be on our minds as to what we need to do to make that happen. This is a wonderful picture. One of our fellows took years and years ago. We've got a corn on corn situation, corn on corn. So we've got old corn stalks laying here. We've got a new corn root growing. They tell us it takes about 24 hours to create a rhizosphere. So here we've got corn root coming out. That's probably 24 hours or less old. Up here we've got a rhizosphere. We've got the soil clinging to it. And look at the aggregation, that soil clumping together. You can see it in the picture. Down here we've got fungi. That corn stalk is painted white. We've got fungal activity. It's gathering up and pulling clays, sand, silts, organic matters, pulling everything together and creating aggregation. You can see it happening here as well. Literature tells us in order to get that to happen, you need near 100% humidity. And if you look, it's fascinating, look with just like a 10x hand lens. When you see this going on, you look at that residue, you'll see little beads of water stacked in there on that residue, just side by side. So there is humidity. That fungal organism is creating a humid situation, pulling that water together so that it can live and thrive and do its thing for us. So there's a lot going on in that picture there that's kind of fun to think about. So biologically created aggregates. We need humus. We've heard about that today. If we have time, we'll have one more piece on it. Organic matter completely broken down is what we're talking about with the humic. Go from residue to organic matter, ultimately broken down into humus, that brownish black material that we see. Got the clay humus colloids, the mineral bridging. Dr. Muir talked about that. You get some chelating going on, tremendous boost in CEC, like this demonstration here. You know, the exchange capacity around the big ball versus all the small ones helps us to comprehend and understand how we can boost the cation exchange capacity and actually boost the anion exchange capacity as well as I understand it. Sticky charged humic bridging, he talked about. Something I was slow to come to learn. If you have something sticky, that means there's charges there. That's why it's sticky, because you have different charges. These products are really sticky. One of our growers in Florida on white sand, when he really got his soil humming, doing some of the things that's been talked about here today, put his hand down in that sand and it'd come out and be black. There's enough humic material being structured, being made, sticking in that soil so that it actually would stain your hand. That's a really good situation if you're on pure sand. So we hold more nutrients. I threw old root channels on there. Over the years, we've done a lot of soil pits, and particularly at Princeton, when you get below the soil surface, you'll get into some yellow clays, and you'll see these black channels down through that clay where the corn roots were before, and then when that all breaks down, it turns into this brown, black, humic material that helps to aerate, does a lot of, everything we've talked about this morning. Root rhizosphere, you've heard us talk about that forever, where that soil comes in contact with the roots and where the biological activity is enhanced due to the root exudation coming out. We want to boost that. Most fields will be deficient, not all, but most. But we need to view that as one unit from our thoughts. You've got the plants, you've got the plant roots, you've got the carbon supply, the soil community, and this tilth we're talking about, and that all has to come together. If we're going to deepen our aerobic zone and boost the rhizosphere on our roots so that we get better nutrient use efficiency, you need all of that to come together. And we need to think about all those pieces and evaluate if you're missing something. Any one piece there probably isn't going to be overly successful. The nitrogen fixers, again, pulling nitrogen from the air to feed the crop is a big deal. Obviously, that's very efficient. That's going to work better if we get these rhizospheres really active. Then the other thing that's interesting is the constant turnover of the organisms and aggregates. The organisms, you've probably heard or read on how quickly some of their life cycles are. They're living, multiplying, and dying. When they die off, that's wonderful plant food. That's likely humus. There's nutrients released. And the same thing, these aggregates, these structures of soil that is much, much bigger than what just these organisms are. Those aggregates constantly are breaking down and being rebuilt as well. When they break down, you're going to get a release of nutrients. This is a really busy slide, and too much here, but I don't know if this will work with the speaker. We had, yeah, that's right, it's going to work. Up in that corner, talks about soil microaggregates, and Dr. Muir was talking about it. The microaggregates consisting of silt, clay, humus, iron, aluminum, lime, depending on pH and or calcium phosphate. And the soil microaggregates are this size. So there's a bunch of those scattered. We're looking at a soil aggregate, one aggregate. So those red things tend to be the microaggregates, which is what Dr. Muir said we really, really want. If you're going to improve your soil, you need those. But look how many of those is scattered within that larger aggregate. These little specks represent bacteria. This is a root. Soil pore space, relative humidity 100%. So that's where we're going to hold moisture. There's a lot of information there, but more I've looked at that comes to soil health and soil life. And you start to think about all the pieces in there if you read it all. If you want a copy, holler, get going. The sand, that's interesting. We think of sand being so much bigger than everything. These represent particles of sand within that aggregate. So that aggregate we can see with our naked eye that we really, really want has a whole lot of things going on in it. I think this is one of Ken's pictures from Iowa. When things work well, we see the soil get darker, and it can happen within weeks in the fields. Here, does it come through roll on the picture? This is treated soil that's darker than the untreated here. The other thing intriguing here is what those corn roots are doing. Spent quite a bit of time in eastern Ohio with a consultant that we've worked with. When we put the biology in with the fertilizers in the row supports, whether it be in furrow or 2x2, in that country that tends to have tight soils that are not in the greatest of shape, we'll see those roots pour right down through the compacted soils at those angles. Because the 35-degree angle or whatever they talk about is ideal. You can dig with a spade, you can dig with a knife, you can probe at it, you can tell there's compacted layers in that soil, that those roots will go right through it if you have other things in place working for you. And it comes back to those rhizospheres again. When the plant's putting out root exudates, the organisms are thriving, they're producing exudates. He used the term, which is dead on, he says it's like putting WD-40 on those roots when they hit a compacted area. They'll just punch right through it. And that changes soils. It improves those soils dramatically. This is one of his farmers. The control to the left, 1 gallon of SP1 at that time, now we're MVP, and 3 gallons. Look at the difference in the color of the soil You can see it in the plants, you can see it in the ears. That was the first year of usage, put it on at planting time. You know, we got there digging, whatever that was, August, September, and seeing those kinds of differences. When you can change the soil from that color to that color, as farmers, I think we intuitively know we did something positive. 2021, we used this in the year of our COVID shutdowns. Dr. Stuart Grandy from University of New Hampshire thought I'd play this because he's taken this to one level we haven't really talked about here yet. So it's a 1.5 minute thing, and then we'll comment about it.
So where we used to think that it was the properties of the plant residues themselves and their resistance to decomposition that was the major driver of soil organic matter formation. We now know that it's a much more multifaceted process that involves the microbes and the microbial decomposition of soil organic residues, and then the production of microbial dead bodies. And so what this means is that it's the microbial traits, such as how fast do they grow, how large is that microbial population, how efficient is the microbial population. In other words, how much of the food that the microbes eat do they convert to biomass versus releasing to the atmosphere as CO2. These become the critical features of soil organic matter in determining how much soil organic matter we have. And so the plant residues still matter. They matter just as much. They are still the ultimate source of all the carbon going into the soil. But it's less about the plant residues themselves becoming soil organic matter, but their impact on the microbial community and the microbial growth traits, such as growth efficiency, growth rate, and microbial biomass.
Should have prefaced that maybe a little more. Dr. Grandy, we met him, then he spoke to our group via Zoom. His group was looking at and trying to identify what is humus. If you dig into the literature, there's been arguments forever, I guess, on what is humus. Is it just partially broken down residue? Here in the upper Midwest, where we come into winter, when we start to break down residue and then the winter shuts us down, that residue lays in a little different format. Is it pieces of coal? There's an argument as to what it is. And we had observed for pretty much forever throughout our company life that when you get this residue breaking down quickly, you end up with a different result. The soil's in a better shape. So what really intrigued us with what he's talking about with his students and his studies was he says humus is dead microbial bodies. He says it's that plain, that simple. And that's a pretty big statement. So how do you accomplish more of that? If we test soils for organic matter and we're picking up organic matter that's been laying there for a year, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, that's one thing. But if we get humus formation and that's fresh, that's plant fertility. And that's plant fertility now. So we're not just talking about organic matter, but we're talking about that humus. And obviously this morning, we've been hearing about a way we can put liquid humus out there in a way that's different from what we've ever done before. Because of the pH of this product, we can put it with our acid fertilizers, particularly the organic folks, where we'd like to be able to put it in with the organic fish type blends. With this product, we can do that. So I think it can help jumpstart what we've got going on. It can sustain us year to year. If we want to plant early, there's benefits. There's a lot of things that we can do with that. But if you accept that humus is dead microbial bodies, then all of this kind of comes together, that when we're trying to feed the soil, break down the residue, inoculate those rhizospheres, utilize the carbon that's coming out of the carbon exudates of the plant, all of this kind of starts to come together, and we can see where the microbial active carbons are that can feed the biology, that can greatly enhance our nutrient use efficiency. So So different opportunities, how to do that in the fall. We love it if you can put a little calcium on each and every year. We know it's not always practical, but we need to consider it. Along with tillage, inoculate the crop with organisms. Then if you do cover crops, that enhances it better. If we do a cover crop after our cash crop and continue to pump root exudates into that soil, obviously that's a really good situation. In the spring, like it if we can use some calciums if it can work. Fertilize that crop, make sure we've got a healthy crop. That crop has to be healthy in order to do its job of capturing the sun, to do its growth, and put root exudates out. Inoculate those rhizospheres. Our mycoseed trait, the MVP, will be on the seed or in furrow in order to get the organisms there to get them started. Then we need to feed them, and then monitor that tilth. During the summer growing seasons, we need to make sure we're feeding the crop, make sure it's healthy, monitor the tilth of the soil. If we don't have tilth in the soil, is there still time to do something about it, or do we need to rethink what we're going to do the next season? We've seen these from Bruce, just all the things that these humic substances go. So the liquid humic products that we can apply with the fertility that we're going to apply in the spring. And obviously, if we have new humus being formed in the soil, we've got some trickle effect of all these things going too. Out of this paper, there's like 32 things listed that are the advantages, and Bruce covered a lot of those, and Dr. Muir spoke about it as well. So there's many agronomic applications, but the no-brainer is the characteristic to greatly improve nutrient availability, and the fortification, which in Premium 21 gives us a humic acid that's fortified to even enhance that even further. So obviously we're pretty excited to integrate this product going forward. And that's my last slide. Yeah. So if there's any questions, otherwise we're headed to lunch.
Any quick questions for Dean here?
What's the difference between the Premium 21 and your SP1?
The SP1 is live organisms. They're in a dormant state, depending on how fresh it is, but it's live organisms. The Premium 21 is humic material, as I've talked about. It's humic acids along with some amino acids. It's more than that, but I think in the crude sense. So yeah, apples and oranges, but very synergistic. I guess to borrow his term, they should marry up really well.
So you use both of them? Or?
Yes. Yep, you got it. Yeah, I used the SP1 MVP type product to inoculate the rhizosphere, to accelerate decomposition of the residues. The humic acid will help us with soil characteristics and provide food to support those organisms.